you think you're a decent parent? Till the day your husband looks you dead in the eye and says, "You're a bad mother. You failed our son." You're standing there with dish soap on your hands, exhausted from working, cooking, helping with homework, doing everything, yet suddenly you're the villain. Your 16-year-old son won't even look at you. Your husband is acting like some Reddit AITA hero, and everyone seems convinced you're the problem. But the real shock doesn't hit until later that night, when you discover what your son has been doing behind your back. And in that moment, one question won't leave your mind. If they think you're a bad mother now, what will they think after what you're about to do? My name is Emily. I'm 42, and until a few months ago, I would have told you my life was pretty normal. It's not perfect, not storybook, but normal enough for any real-life story. Suburban house, 2 kids, a husband, a job I didn't totally hate. I watched Reddit stories, those family drama channels. The toxic family, entitled people, betrayal story kind of stuff, and always thought, wow, families are really messed up. I had no idea I was slowly becoming the main character in my own Reddit AITA revenge story. The kind people binge at 2 a.m. on YouTube. My husband, Greg, works in sales and loves to talk like he's the only thing keeping this family afloat. "You know, I bring in most of the money," he'd say, anytime we argued about something basic like chores or parenting. "I work as a nurse. Hours are insane. The pay isn't exactly what it should be. But I was the one making sure bills were paid on time, meals were cooked, kids' appointments were scheduled. I was the emotional support system for everyone." But apparently that didn't count as real work. We have 2 kids, Jake, 16, and Mia, 11. Mia is sweet, quiet, loves reading and drawing. Jake used to be my little boy who hugged me in public and told me about every little thing that happened at school. Somewhere around 14, he flipped a switch. Suddenly, he was moody, secretive, buried in his phone, slamming doors, and disappearing into his room for hours. I told myself it was just teen stuff. Everyone on relationships says teenagers are like that. But there was this edge to him, a coldness that made me feel like I was losing him. The first big crack happened the night the school called. I had just gotten off a 12-hour shift at the hospital, still in scrubs, when I saw the missed call and voicemail from the vice principal. My stomach dropped. I called back, and the woman on the phone sounded tired and cautious in that way educators do when they've had to deal with way too many entitled people and toxic family situations. She told me there had been an incident involving Jake and another student, and they needed both parents to come in the next morning. I relayed the message to Greg when he got home, and he immediately rolled his eyes. "It's probably some teacher overreacting," he said, opening a beer. "Kids fight. Boys are boys." That sentence made my skin crawl. I pressed him to take it seriously, but he just shrugged and said we'd talk to Jake in the morning. That night, I knocked on Jake's door. No answer. I opened it anyway. He was at his desk, headphones on, scrolling something on his screen. "The school called," I said gently. "Is there something you need to tell me?" He didn't turn around. "It's not a big deal. Some loser made up stuff because he's jealous." His voice was flat, annoyed. "Can you not, Mom?" "I'm busy." The next morning at the school, the vice principal, a counselor, and a teacher sat across from us at a small table in a room that smelled like old coffee and anxiety. They slid a printed email across the table and explained that a girl in Jake's class had come forward and said he'd been harassing her online for weeks. Fake accounts, DMs, vicious comments about her body, her clothes, her weight, even about her family. Screenshots were attached. Some of the messages were too cruel to repeat out loud. My vision actually blurred as I read them. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to deny it, say it was some mix-up. Instead, he slumped back in his chair, eyes narrowed, and said, "So, she's dramatic." "Everyone jokes like that." The counselor calmly explained this wasn't joking. This was targeted bullying, and the girl had stopped coming to school. She'd written in her statement that she felt unsafe and humiliated. I felt like my heart had been ripped out. This wasn't some silly fight. This was my son making someone else's life hell. On the drive home, the silence was thick. When we walked in the door, I told Jake to sit down at the table. I was shaking, but I kept my voice low. "You are grounded," I said. "No phone. No games. No going out. We're going to apologize to that girl's family, and you're going to start therapy. This stops now." For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Then he turned to Greg and said, "You're really going to let her talk to me like that?" Greg stared at me like I'd slapped him. "You're overreacting," he said. "Kids mess up. You're coming down on him too hard." I couldn't believe it. "Too hard," I said. "He destroyed a girl online. She doesn't even feel safe coming to school." Greg's face hardened. "You're being hysterical. You always do this. You turn everything into a crisis." And that was the first time he said it. No wonder he hides things from you. "You're a bad mother when it comes to stuff like this. You suffocate him." The words hit me like a punch. A bad mother. It sounded like those harsh comments under some parenting Reddit stories, the kind where strangers dissect every choice. I felt hot tears sting my eyes, but I refused to break in front of them. "Caring about the girl he hurt and trying to hold him accountable makes me a bad mother?" I said quietly. "Then fine. But I'm not letting this go." Jake stood up, grabbed his phone off the counter, and muttered, "This is why I can't stand being here," as he stormed to his room. Greg didn't stop him. For days the house was tense. Greg gave me the cold shoulder, only speaking when absolutely necessary. Jake barely came out of his room. I called the school and arranged to pay for the girls' counseling sessions anonymously. I booked a therapist for Jake myself and told him he had to go. He rolled his eyes, but he went, at least physically. Emotionally, he was a stone wall. After the second session, the therapist gently told me, "He's very resistant. There's anger here that isn't just about this girl." Meanwhile, Greg started making little digs at me. "Well, we know how strict Mom is," he'd say, when Mia asked a simple question. Or, "You know how your mother gets," when Jake looked annoyed. Slowly, I realized he wasn't just disagreeing with my parenting. He was undermining me, painting me as the crazy, controlling, over-emotional mother in our own house. It was like living in a twisted betrayal story you'd expect from a toxic family subreddit. But that was only the beginning. One night, after another argument about Jake's phone usage, I went into the living room and opened our shared laptop to pay a bill. As soon as I opened the browser, I saw a tab still logged into Jake's Instagram. At first, I almost closed it. I don't like invading my kids' privacy. Then I remembered that girl. The screenshots, the way he'd looked directly at me and shrugged it off like nothing. Something inside me snapped. I clicked. There were multiple accounts, some with his name, but a couple with fake usernames. No personal photos, just mean posts and anonymous comments. I dug through the NIMs. He wasn't just bullying that one girl. He was in group chats where kids posted pictures of classmates and rated them, ripped them apart, mocked their bodies and families. He'd sent a voice note calling one boy pathetic for being poor. There were vile jokes about mental health, self-harm, even someone's dead father. My hands were shaking so hard I had to steady them on the table. Then I found something worse, an email account tied to one of the fake profiles. The inbox was open, and inside were PayPal notifications. Small amounts. At first, $5, $10, then bigger. $30, $50. The payment notes made my stomach turn cold. "Thanks for the pics." More of her crying pills. "Can you get a video next time?" I realized, with a wave of nausea, that my son had been secretly taking photos and little clips of kids at school crying. Embarrassed, being picked on and selling them to some disgusting people online. This wasn't just teenage cruelty. This was financial secrecy and exploitation. I scrolled further and saw he'd received over $1,500 in the last few months alone. What happened next shocked me. I confronted Jake that night, called him into the kitchen, turned my phone around, and showed him the emails, the screenshots, everything. His face went pale for a split second, then hardened. "You went through my stuff," he shouted. "You're insane. You're literally stalking me." I could barely speak. "You sold videos of your classmates crying?" "Jake, do you understand how sick that is?" He scoffed. "They're just vids. People buy worse on the internet. You don't get it. It's just hustle." Greg walked in right as Jake said. She went through my private accounts. He stopped, looked at me, then at Jake. "Is that true?" he asked me, like I'd been the one caught dealing drugs behind the school. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "And if you'd like to be angry at someone, be angry at your son for selling other kids pain on the internet." I waited for him to turn to Jake to be horrified to back me up. Instead, he sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said, "Emily, this is exactly what I mean. You push too hard. You snoop. You overreact. You're driving him away." Something inside me broke clean in that moment. Years of late-night shifts, making dinner half asleep, juggling bills, going without so the kids could have more, defending Jake when teachers said he was distracted, covering for Greg when he forgot school events. All of it flashed in front of me. And here I was, being told by the man who barely knew what our daughter's teacher's name was, that I was a bad mother. In that instant, my fear turned into something else. Cold, clear anger. Then he did something I'll never forget. Greg stepped closer, lowered his voice, and said, "If you keep this up, you're going to lose him. You're going to push him right out of this house. And honestly, if it comes down to it, I'm not going to watch you ruin him. I'll take him and go." He said it like a threat, like a promise. Like he truly believed he could use my son as a weapon against me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Then I went upstairs, shut the bedroom door. And for the first time in my life, I let myself stop trying to fix everything. I opened my own laptop, logged into our joint bank account, and started looking deeper. The financial secrecy I found made me feel sick all over again. Over the last year, Greg had been quietly moving money into a separate account, small transfers, just under thresholds that would flag as unusual. Little withdrawals that added up. Thousands of dollars gone. Meanwhile, he'd been giving me speeches about tightening our belts and not splurging when I bought Mia new sneakers. There were also charges from some coaching program he'd never mentioned, and suspicious payments labeled consulting. I dug further and found emails tied to that mystery account. Messages between Greg and his brother talking about how, if things go south, at least we've got something set aside, and Emily doesn't need to know everything. There it was, betrayal, the entitlement, the quiet assumption that the money I also earned was his to hide. She helped me quietly start the process. Documentation, copies of bank statements, screenshots of Greg's messages, records from the school incident. I also called the school counselor and told her what I'd found about the videos, asking about next steps. They took it seriously. There would be consequences, possibly even legal ones. It terrified me, but I knew protecting other kids mattered more than protecting my son from facing reality. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part. I cooked, went to work. I nodded when Greg made his little comments. I ignored Jake's glares, but inside I was building something, a line in the sand, a life raft for me and Mia at least. I opened my own bank account and diverted part of my paycheck there. I started packing little boxes, telling Mia I was decluttering, while in reality, I was slowly separating my life from Greg's. The final trigger came on a Sunday afternoon. I overheard Jake in his room laughing on a call with a friend. "Yeah, she freaked out again," he said. Started crying about some girl I hurt. Dad told her she's a psycho, that she's ruining everything. Honestly, when I turn 18, I'm going with him. I'm done with her. He said it like I was some cartoon villain, like the emotional story of the girl he bullied didn't matter at all. I walked into his room without knocking. Kay jumped, yanked his headphones off, and yelled, "Ever heard of privacy?" I looked at him, my baby, who wasn't a baby anymore, who had turned into someone I didn't recognize, and I said quietly, "Pack a bag." He frowned. "What?" I repeated more firmly, "Pack a bag." Greg walked in a few minutes later, demanding to know what was going on. I was in the living room, suitcase by the door, Mia's small backpack next to mine. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. "I'm taking Mia to stay at my sister's for a while," I said. "We need space. I've already filed for separation. And by the way, I know about the hidden account, the transfers, everything. So if you want to talk about who's ruining this family, maybe look in the mirror." He turned red, then white. "You're overreacting," he started, out of habit. I cut him off. "Stop. I have documentation. A lawyer, copies of everything. And I've already sent the files about Jake's online activity to the school and to the parents of at least one of the kids he hurt. He needs real consequences. It's not a dad who excuses everything and calls the only person trying to stop him a bad mother." Jake exploded. "You what? Are you trying to ruin my life?" He stepped toward me, but I held up a hand. "Your choices have consequences," I said. "You don't have to like me. You don't even have to live with me when you're older. But right now, I will not be the mother who looks the other way while her son destroys other kids online and her husband hides money and calls her crazy." Jake faced disciplinary action at school, including suspension and mandatory counseling. Some parents were furious, understandably. Others quietly thanked me for stepping in. He texted me a few times, mostly anger and blame at first. Then, slowly, the tone shifted. Short messages. They made me apologize to her. Weeks later, therapist says I have to talk about Dad too. I didn't respond right away. I was still too raw. But I read every word. One afternoon, Jake showed up at my sister's house. He looked thinner, tired, older. He sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't roll his eyes or cross his arms. He just said, "They told me what you did for that girl, and for the others. I'm still mad, but my therapist says I should say thank you." It wasn't a Hallmark moment. There were no tears and hugs. But it was a crack in the wall. A start. Greg, on the other hand, is still furious. He tells anyone who will listen his version of the saga, painting me as a bitter woman who destroyed her own family over internet drama. But the courts didn't buy it. The bank statements didn't buy it. And deep down, I don't think he does either. He just can't stand that I stopped playing the role he wrote for me. So here I am telling you this like a Reddit confession turned relationships revenge story. I was called a bad mother, a hysterical woman, a destroyer of peace. All because I dared to hold my son and my husband accountable. In the end, the real revenge wasn't some big public scene. It was quietly, firmly taking back my power, my money, my boundaries, and refusing to be the one who always absorbs everyone else's damage. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? And don't forget to subscribe to Golden Years Diary for more stories like this.